Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old. I have a degree in business administration and work as a marketing manager at a multinational company here in Chicago. Until last week, I thought I had everything in life: a solid career, a beautiful condo in Lincoln Park, and most importantly, an 8-year marriage with the man I considered my soulmate. But I discovered in the worst possible way that I was living a complete illusion. Do you believe someone can be so naive as to think that a clause on paper will protect the heart? I believed it. My husband, Michael, 42 years old, has always been that type of man who inspires confidence. A successful financial consultant, elegant, with that smooth talk that wins anyone over. For years, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world by his side. But all of this crumbled in a split second, during a family dinner that should have been like any other. It was the day my entire life changed course, and it all started with a phrase that still echoes in my head. She's younger and fun. Michael and I met in 2016 at a corporate networking event downtown Chicago. He courted me for months with flowers, surprise dinners, weekend trips to charming little towns. He was romantic in a way that seemed too good to be true. We got married in 2017 in a beautiful ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. But Michael, being the practical man he was, insisted we sign a prenup. "It's just a precaution, honey," he said with that gentle smile. The document included a specific clause. In case of proven adultery by either party, the guilty party forfeits any right to shared assets acquired during the marriage. At the time, I thought it was almost romantic. How naive I was. For the first 5 years, everything seemed perfect. But looking back now, I can see when things started to change. Michael began working late more often, his phone suddenly required a password, and business trips became monthly excursions. Our intimate life deteriorated. He was always too tired, too stressed. When I expressed concern, he'd turn it around. "You're being paranoid, Sarah. Can't you see how hard I'm working for us?" He made me feel guilty for questioning him. The night that changed everything was supposed to be a celebration. Michael's parents were visiting, and we had planned a family dinner at our favorite restaurant. Michael seemed unusually nervous, checking his phone constantly. When his phone rang, he walked away to take the call, speaking in hushed, intimate tones. When he returned, there was a lightness in his eyes that hadn't been there in months. His mother, Patricia, with the intuition only a mother possesses, leaned forward. "Michael, you seem different lately. Happier, but also distant. Is everything all right? With you two?" Then it happened. Michael's phone rang again, and this time he answered without excusing himself. His voice immediately softened to a tone I hadn't heard in years. "No, I can't talk right now." "Yes, I know. I'll call you later." Before hanging up, I heard him whisper, "Miss you too." The table went silent. Michael tried to play it off as work, but nobody believed him. The ride home was torture. When we got to our condo, I confronted him. "Who was on the phone tonight?" He insisted it was a client, but when I demanded to see his phone, he refused. "Show me your phone," I said. "If it's just work, show me." His face hardened. "My phone contains confidential client information." That's when I pulled out my own phone and checked our shared cell phone account. "I can see you've been calling the same number every day for the past 3 months, I said, dialing the number. A young woman's voice answered, "Hey baby, miss me already?" I hung up immediately, my hands trembling. "How long?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Michael slumped onto the couch in defeat. 6 months, he whispered. "Her name is Jessica. She works at the gym I go to. She's 26, and she's different from you, Sarah. She's young, spontaneous, fun. She makes me feel alive again." There it was, she's younger and fun. As if I, at 34, was some ancient, boring relic. So this is my fault? I'm too old, too boring? He explained that Jessica was carefree, didn't analyze everything, didn't ask questions. Each word was a nice to my heart. When he said he wanted a divorce, I surprised myself with my calmness. Fine. But Michael, you seem to have forgotten our prenup, the one with the adultery clause. The color drained from his face. He'd completely forgotten about the legal document that would now destroy his financial future. The next morning, I went straight to my lawyer's office. Rebecca Martinez reviewed our prenup and smiled. Sarah, with this document and proof of adultery, you're in an incredibly strong position. He forfeits all rights to shared assets. I spent the afternoon gathering evidence from our financial records and his laptop. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, jewelry purchases, all funded with our joint money. I found emails where he called me his boring wife and promised Jessica they'd start their life together soon. A week later, Michael returned for clothes. He wanted to tell our families about the divorce. Actually, your parents invited us to dinner tonight. Don't you think we should tell them together? He reluctantly agreed. At dinner, his parents sensed the tension. Are you sure everything's all right? Robert asked. Actually, Michael has something he wants to share, I said sweetly. Go ahead, honey. Tell them about Jessica. Michael finally admitted to the affair. Her name is Jessica, she's 26, and she's younger and fun. Patricia gasped while Robert's face darkened with anger. That's when I pulled out the evidence folder. Since Michael brought up Jessica, maybe he should tell you about the hotel rooms he's been booking with our joint credit card, about the jewelry he's been buying her, about the vacation to Cancun while telling me he was at a conference. I spread photos across the table, Michael and Jessica looking like the happy couple. Patricia made a sound like a wounded animal. You used joint money to fund your affair? Robert was furious. We raised you better than this. Then I read from Michael's emails about his boring wife and how Jessica made him feel alive. Patricia was crying, but I wasn't finished. There's more you should know, I said, pulling out the prenup. Before we married, Michael insisted on this document with an adultery clause. I read it aloud. In case of proven adultery, the guilty party forfeits any right to shared assets. I'm saying, Michael, that your affair just cost you everything. The condo, the lake house, the investment portfolio, all of it stays with me. The irony was perfect. The prenup he'd insisted on to protect himself was now going to destroy him. Michael stood up, his chair falling over. Sarah, you can't do this. But Robert cut him off. Don't you dare speak to her that way. You brought this on yourself. Michael realized Jessica expected him to get half of everything in the divorce. Without those assets, he couldn't maintain the lifestyle he'd promised her. Sarah, please, we can work something out. But I was done being manipulated. You made your choice, Michael. You chose Jessica over me. Now you get to live with the consequences. The divorce was swift and decisive. Jessica disappeared from Michael's life within weeks of learning about his reduced financial situation. The prenup he'd insisted on to protect himself ended up protecting my assets instead of his. I kept the condo, the lake house, and our investment portfolio. More importantly, I kept my dignity and self-respect. But the aftermath wasn't as clean as I'd hoped. Michael became desperate, trying every manipulation tactic he could think of. He showed up at my office, called my friends, even reached out to my parents, painting himself as the victim of a vindictive ex-wife. Sarah's being unreasonable, he told anyone who would listen. She's taking everything just to hurt me. What he conveniently left out was the part about his 6-month affair and the financial betrayal. The most pathetic moment came when he tried to contest the prenup in court, claiming he'd signed it under duress. His lawyer argued that 8 years ago, Michael couldn't have anticipated falling out of love. Rebecca shut that down quickly. Your Honor, the defendant didn't fall out of love. He fell into bed with another woman while using marital funds to finance the affair. the judge wasn't sympathetic to Michael's plight. What made it even more satisfying was watching Michael's lawyer realize how weak their case was. During discovery, we presented evidence of over $30,000 spent on Jessica. Hotel rooms, jewelry, expensive restaurants, even a weekend spa retreat. The judge looked disgusted as Rebecca presented receipt after receipt, email after email, showing the systematic betrayal of our marriage vows and our joint finances. Michael's face during that hearing was something I'll never forget. The confident, charming man I'd married was gone, replaced by someone desperate and small. When the judge denied his motion to invalidate the prenup, he actually had the audacity to look at me with wounded eyes, as if I was the one who had wronged him. The entitlement was breathtaking. His parents, Patricia and Robert, stopped speaking to him entirely after learning the full extent of his deception. Patricia called me privately to apologize again and to tell me that they were removing Michael from their will. "We didn't raise a man who would betray his family like this," she said through tears. "You were like a daughter to us, Sarah. He threw away not just you, but all of us." That conversation meant more to me than any legal victory. I also discovered through mutual friends that Michael had been telling people Jessica left him because I'd poisoned her against him. The truth was simpler and more humiliating for him. When Jessica realized he'd be starting over with nothing but debt and a tarnished reputation, the fantasy of their perfect life together evaporated. She'd fallen in love with the lifestyle he provided, not the man himself. During this time, I learned something unexpected about myself. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The woman who used to doubt herself when Michael questioned her instincts was gone. In her place stood someone who trusted her judgment, valued her worth, and refused to accept less than she deserved. The betrayal had broken my heart, but it had also broken the chains of self-doubt that had held me back for years. The healing process wasn't linear, though. There were nights when I'd wake up reaching for him, forgetting for a moment that he was gone. There were mornings when I'd make coffee for two out of habit, then stare at the extra cup with tears in my eyes. The hardest part wasn't just losing Michael. It was mourning the future we'd planned together, the children we'd talked about having, the dream of growing old side by side. But slowly, something beautiful began to emerge from the wreckage. I started rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. I took art classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I traveled solo to places Michael had never wanted to visit, a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, a cooking class in Tuscany, a photography workshop in Iceland. Each trip taught me that I didn't need someone else to validate my experiences or make them meaningful. My friends rallied around me in ways that surprised me. I realized that during my marriage, I'd become isolated, so focused on trying to fix things with Michael that I'd neglected other relationships. Now, freed from that constant anxiety, I was able to be fully present for the people who truly cared about me. My friend circle expanded, filled with successful, independent women who inspired me to keep growing. The professional opportunities that came my way were incredible. Word spread in our industry about my grace under pressure during the divorce, and headhunters started calling. I was offered positions at 3 different companies, each with significant salary increases. I chose to stay with my current company, but negotiated a substantial raise and more creative control over my projects. Success, I learned, was the best revenge. 6 months later, I was promoted to senior marketing director. My focus and determination had impressed the board, and they offered me opportunities I'd never dreamed of. I started dating again, cautiously but optimistically. This time, I knew exactly what I was looking for: honesty, integrity, genuine partnership. I wouldn't settle for charm without character, ever again. One evening, I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop. She looked tired, older, the carefree spark completely gone. When she saw me, I could see her debate whether to approach or slip away unnoticed. Finally, she walked over, her hands trembling slightly. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I wanted to apologize. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry for my part in destroying your marriage." Looking at her, I saw a young woman who had learned some hard truths about life and love. "I thought he really loved me," she continued, tears forming in her eyes. "He made me feel so special, like I was the only woman in the world. But when the money was gone, when he couldn't take me on those expensive trips anymore, when he had to move into a small apartment," she trailed off, but I understood perfectly. "Jessica," I said gently, "you don't owe me an apology. You were young and believed his lies. Michael is the one who was married. Michael is the one who made vows. You were just caught up in his fantasy." I meant every word. The anger I'd felt toward her had long since faded, replaced with something closer to compassion. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I see him sometimes around the neighborhood. He looks defeated. He tried to get back together with me a few months ago, but I couldn't do it. I realized I never really knew him at all. The man I thought I was in love with was just the character he was playing." Her insight surprised me. Maybe she wasn't as naive as I thought. "I hope you learned something about building relationships on solid foundations rather than stolen moments and borrowed money. Real love doesn't require secrets and lies." She nodded again, and I could see that this conversation was as healing for her as it was for me. Walking away from that coffee shop, I felt a profound sense of closure. Not just about Jessica, but about the entire chapter of my life that had ended so dramatically. I realized I'd completely forgiven her, and more importantly, I'd forgiven myself for the years I'd spent doubting my instincts and accepting less than I deserved. The final twist in this story came 6 months later. I was at a charity gala for the Marketing Association when I spotted a familiar figure across the room. It was Michael. But he looked nothing like the confident man I'd married. His suit was off the rack, his hairline had noticeably receded, and there was a desperate quality to the way he was networking, trying too hard to impress potential clients. When our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, I saw something I'd never seen before in his face: genuine remorse. He approached me during a quiet moment, his hands shaking slightly. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above the orchestra, "you look incredible. Happy." I was wearing a designer dress I'd bought with my promotion bonus, my confidence radiating from every pore. "Thank you, Michael. How are you doing?" I asked, genuinely curious about his answer. "I've been better," he admitted, looking down at his hands. "I wanted to tell you something. I know it's too late, and I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. I was wrong. About everything. Jessica, the affair, the way I treated you. All of it. You deserved so much better, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old Sarah, the one who might have been tempted to comfort him, to minimize his pain. But that woman was gone. "Michael," I said, calmly, "I appreciate you saying that. But you didn't just throw away the best thing that happened to you. You threw away the best version of yourself. The man I married had integrity, honor, compassion. Somewhere along the way, you chose to become someone else entirely." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I see that now. I see what I lost, what I destroyed. I just wanted you to know that I know it was all my fault." There was no manipulation in his voice this time, no attempt to gain sympathy or advantage, just raw, honest regret. "I hope you find your way back to who you used to be," I said, meaning it. "Not for me, but for yourself, and for whoever comes into your life next." With that, I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the ballroom, a broken man facing the consequences of his choices. She'd been a symptom, not the disease. The real problem was Michael's character, his willingness to betray everything we'd built for momentary excitement. Sometimes the most painful lessons teach us the most valuable truths. I learned that contracts can protect your assets, but only character can protect your heart. And I learned that being mature, responsible, and having standards isn't something to apologize for. It's something to be proud of. That prenup clause not only saved my financial future, it gave me justice and closure. Sometimes life has a perfect way of balancing the scales. If this story shocked you, just wait for what's next. Leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and of course, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single notification.